And next up, we have our panel. I'm super excited about this panel because we have three amazing people that are going to be talking about how Web3 and the world just gets to use Ethereum on the enterprise side. So we have three amazing people for this next talk. And that's Dan Shaw, Conor Svensson, and Peter Robinson. And Dan will be the one moderating it, and I'll let Dan intro our panelists as part of this. And I'll kind of have him give him the rest of the context. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dan and Conor and Peter to this chat, and I'll let them kick off with our next panel. Welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Kartik.
Yeah. Oh, hello.
Welcome. All right. So today we're going to be talking to the creator of Web3j and talk a little bit about Web3, how that's evolving, and how that kind of fits into a broader enterprise context. I'll be your host. I'm Dan Shaw. I'm an advisor to the Ethereum Foundation on enterprise community. And I'll let Conor and Peter introduce themselves. So Conor, do you want to kick off the introductions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. So Conor Svensson, I'm the author of Web3j and also the founder of Web3 Labs. I'll leave it at that. Pass over to Peter.
Yeah. I'm a technical director, applied cryptographer at Consensus, protocol engineering, R&D. Back to you, Dan.
Awesome. So I want to start with some basics, especially since we're addressing not just the total Ethereum community, but also the enterprise community. I'd love to have kind of crisp definition of what we're talking about. So Peter, can you help us lay the groundwork and just remind folks what we're talking about when we're talking about Web3?
Sure. So the simplest way is let's talk about Web 1, 2, and then we'll get to 3. So Web 1, I've got a web server and I own the content, I write the content, it's pretty static. People surf the internet, come to my site. Web 2, I own a server, Facebook, Twitter, and people come to me and they create the content and I monetize their content. But I own their content. And Web 3, it's decentralized. And so people own their own content, people own their own business logic, and it's there's no central body that owns it. So you don't have centralized governance and you don't have centralized servers. So you might have a network of servers that the information is across. The other big thing about Web3 is it's the web of money. So you can do value transfer as part of things. It's a native part of the whole system. So I don't know, Dan, is that a pretty good introduction to Web3?
That's great. Yeah, that's great context. Thanks. So Conor, you created Web3j. Why don't you sort of lay the groundwork there and tell us a little about why you created it and what it does.
Sure. So it all started for me back in 2016. I'd had, historically I'd spent many years working in enterprise and then finally got out of that world into the world of startups in 2015. Worked on my first venture. It didn't work out, but then kind of moved sideways and discovered Ethereum in 2016. So I wasn't one of the super early people on the scene, but I'd followed Bitcoin, but Bitcoin had never really captured my imagination. Fundamentally, it was just a store of value. What I always loved about Ethereum was just the whole concept of having this massively decentralized world computer, basically, to paraphrase other people in their description. And what drew me to Ethereum was that looking at blockchain back then, it was the project that really stood out. It was the first of the blockchain 2.0 projects, and the community around it reminded me a lot of Linux. I've been kind of big into Unix and Linux in the 90s, and unfortunately for me, like, you know, jumped on the wrong horse, got into like Open Solaris and this sort of stuff when the Linux community was exploding. And then, you know, when it came around to, you know, the blockchain and looking at the communities there, I was like, I'm going with the biggest community this time around. I don't care about what I think the technologies. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like, it was an amazing jump, you know, I think with going to, you know, to 2.0, but fundamentally, like, the community thing was what drew me into it, as well as just what it was all about. And you know, even now in 2020, I feel exactly the same way. Like, you know, we've had all these other projects emerge. Yeah, you know, they're so-called Ethereum betas or whatever you want to call them, but I don't think it's any different. We've still got an amazing community in the Ethereum ecosystem. But going back to 2016, you know, I'd spent all these years in enterprise working on the JVM and being mainly a Java developer. And when I started working with Ethereum, it kind of seemed like, you know, most of what was happening there was in the JavaScript world. And, you know, coming from that enterprise background, I thought, well, there's all these enterprises talking about the transformative potential of blockchain. Ethereum's the, you know, biggest blockchain platform. So surely there's a need there to ensure the JVM can plug in seamlessly to it. And that was the genesis of Web3j. Spent a bit of time researching to see if anyone else had an equivalent that just kind of, you know, hooked in at the API layer. There wasn't anything. I thought it'd be a simple project, but then got sucked into the rabbit hole for designing and, you know, generating smart contract wrappers and all this other stuff you have to do. And released the first version of it just in time for DevCon 2 in Shanghai. So it was, yeah, and kind of from there, it's just grown and grown. And it's been a lot of fun, like, you know, just having this project and see it, yeah, you know, emerge over the years and get ever more sophisticated.
Right on. So you touched on it a little bit. Maybe, you know, Peter, you kind of continue the thread. You know, we've got the JVM and Java. And, you know, Java's been around forever. It's the old dinosaur, the old workhorse. You know, why should we care as we're sort of, you know, innovating and paving out this new, you know, universe? Why should we care about Java?
Well, I mean, let's face. I mean, I've worked at a few companies, and one of them was Oracle Labs, and Oracle's got a product, I won't say which one it is, and it's got 100 million lines of code, and they're in Java. Now, if someone said, oh, we want to put this new module in and we're going to bang it in Golang or Rust or something, they're going to say, no, you know, it's really simple. No, we've got 100 million lines of code. And they're not the only company that has a massive code base of Java. So they've got all these devs who know the language. They've got capability, and so trying to have a new little piece that's in a different language makes supporting the overall product much harder. So that is a big reason. Another reason is a lot of companies like to outsource to places such as India, and you've got something like, you know, 10 million devs in India who know Java. So that's another reason for why people use Java as well, is you can outsource to all over the world. And yeah, there are just a lot of people who know Java. And so if you can use this tool, Web3j, so you can think of the Ethereum network, you've got all these nodes. Web3j is this library that you integrate into your app, into your Java application to talk to the network. And so and that's why people use Java, is because there are a lot of people who know it, and it makes it, and if you've got an existing code base, then you just want to keep on going. I think.
So Conor, like you've built this, you know, incredible community. You know, what are some of the ways that folks are leveraging, you know, Web3j on the JVM? You know, we have, you know, emerging, you know, languages like, you know, Kotlin and, you know, the Android ecosystem. You know, how is building, you know, the Web3 functionality for the JVM? What have you seen the community doing?
So I think, and you know, just building off the back of what Peter was saying, you know, like so many companies started investing heavily in their, Java infrastructure in the late 90s. And so you've had basically 20 years of business platforms being built. And, these companies have exploded in terms of their size and their global footprint. And so, what that's meant is that, for people like them, it's about being able to create, some nice integrations there. Like the classic thing, of course, is, these enterprise integration patterns, which is a very well established thing in terms of how you, connect disparate systems, or you solve like different messaging problems. And there's loads and loads of products and, very large companies that are kind of operate in that space. Obviously, like nowadays, the Kafka message bus is one of the big ones, but then, historically you had, IBM MQ is still massive there, and MuleSoft kind of made it their bread and butter, just kind of servicing that community. And so, what you see is like a number of different integrations there. That's a very natural place for it. So, part of it is having adapters that can, write to, persistent data stores, but then also, like, say, with the guy Bilgin over at Red Hat, who wrote the, Web3j adapter for Camel, there's kind of a classic example of how it just kind of plugs into it. Like what we certainly see is just that there's, within the JVM world, it tends to be quite different, the sort of applications and use cases that people have versus like, the JavaScript world. I mean, don't get me wrong, like the full stack development thing, it's amazing, what you can do nowadays with Node as, on the front end and the back end. But where you have these enterprise services, you're thinking about back-end services typically. You're not going to create like a UI and these sorts of things generally using the JVM. You can though, and there are frameworks for that. But it's kind of, it's those sort of serious business apps that are doing a lot more. It's more about the data processing and, doing transformations of messages and so on and so forth, which, you don't have those sorts of problems when you're writing like, client-side applications. It's more when you get into much sort of meatier scenarios. But the other point, of course, is, as you mentioned there, Dan, is the Android community. And this is something which, it's been great to see the adoption of Web3j in that space. Samsung use it in their blockchain SDK, which they released last year for people building, wanting to integrate with Ethereum on Android phones. And then also Opera they were one of the early people to use it with their crypto wallet as well there. And so, I think what's so powerful about the JVM is that it kind of serves these two massive communities. They're not the kind of ones that people will necessarily write a web app in, but if you want to write a phone app, then you've kind of and you don't want to. I mean, of course, you've got things like React Native, for instance, to simplify. But if you want to write it on the native platform, then Web3j is what you use for that, and likewise as well in the JVM. Kotlin's got a lot of growth in the Android community just because of its backward compatibility, but I won't go into bore people with those details now. But yeah, it's very, very well embedded in those different communities, and consistently you see the biggest programming languages. It's kind of alternates depending on which survey it is, whether JavaScript, Python, C, or Java. So it's but very bright.
That's excellent. So we're at a point where Web3 is beginning to take off, and we're heading towards a convergence of Web 2 and Web 3. But there's still kind of the last bit of chasm, especially folks that are coming from the Web 2 world and trying to digest what Web 3 means to them. Peter, what do you see as some of the key things that folks need to either do or understand to cross that chasm?
Ooh. I think understanding decentralization is, I mean, if you want to do a good app in the Web3 world, because there are a lot of people they've got an application and they said, we want to blockchain it. And so they just add a blockchain to it. And there's all sorts of central points of failure. If you want to have a credible blockchain app, then, you know, there needs to not be these central points of failure. I think that's a big one. And thinking about the design of the application. Also thinking about if you're going to be doing something on the blockchain, you really don't want to be having some massive, heavyweight, complex smart contract. The smart contract should be a minimalist thing with a lot of other business logic. You know, so you've got your core business logic on chain and have a lot of other things happening off chain. But then some people can dip into the Web3 world for micropayments. And I've seen that a lot with, say, games. So this is actually a topic, you have to shut me up on this one, because this is something where I could talk for hours, because yeah, but it's a huge field. But I mean, a way that people often dip their toes in is to allow micropayments of their thing that they've got. So people paying, say, with an ERC20 or just with Ether itself. And that's a way of people who've got a Web2 app integrating Web3.
Nice, nice. Awesome. So, you know, Conor, you know, how is you know, Web3j evolving to you know, meet the needs, and what does the future of Web3j look like?
So we've got some really cool things that we're working on at the moment, and fortunately as well, like the Ethereum Foundation has just given us another grant. So we've got to give a big shout out and thank you to them for that as well, because you know, it makes a big difference, you know, when you can have some funds to really focus on this as opposed to kind of working around other projects and you know, to do this stuff. And so, you know, what we have, and we've already got like a, you know, the core framework support for like the, you know, the specific features of the major Ethereum clients, and also things like Hyperledger, well, sorry, and also the enterprise focused ones like Basil and Quorum too. We have Maven and Gradle plugins, which are the two major build tools used on the Java and Android platforms. And you know, those build plugins are sophisticated enough now to the point where if you have Solidity code in your project, it will automatically, you know, generate the Java code to talk to them, and then it can also generate unit tests as well for those. Something else though that the guys have just got a release going out tonight is an open API generator. So what's really awesome about this is that this is a build plugin that you basically say you add this build plugin to your project and some Solidity code, and what that will do is it actually generates a fully runnable project which spins up open API APIs for every method on your smart contract, enabling you to, you know, deploy and manage and whatever else. So what that means is you can basically just take a Solidity contract, and then you can just spin up an application that exposes it in an open API format. So it's like, you know, it massively reduces the barriers, because it's one of those things we've seen people do again and again. They create a smart contract, then they write a Java app to basically create a web service to talk to it. And so we've automated all of that now. But some of the other things though that we are going to be focusing on now, well, you know, one of them is you know, starting to think about the ETH2 side of things. You know, with the beacon chain, it doesn't really change how people are going to be interacting with you know, mainnet in the near term. But you know, where we feel that there's still, you know, a bit of value is you know, having a Web3j library for talking to the beacon chain client API. We're also starting to go deeper with our debugger as well. So we do have a stack-based debugger that uses the Hyperledger Basu EVM. So you've got a production-grade EVM for running your unit tests against, you know, with Web3j, and we can easily specify, you know, Docker files or an in-memory EVM to do this. So it makes integration testing, you know, really powerful against different clients. But we're going to be beefing up the debugger. We're looking at support for it in IntelliJ, so you can actually do you know, have a proper debugging experience in IntelliJ. So you're going from Java code to Solidity and back again. And then the other thing is being able to actually pull down, but like a lot of projects, like you know, Open Zeppelin being the main, you know, the one that people probably use the most, but they typically upload you know, contract artifacts into NPN. And so we're going to enable it in Web3j. So if you like put in an at annotation like you do in the JavaScript world for your for referencing a smart contract that lives on an NPM repository, that'll actually, those contracts will get pulled down into your Java project. So you don't have to copy and paste code to use certain interfaces and these sorts of things. And the other thing is a form of migrations and just, refreshing the docs and these sorts of things too, that, we haven't, spent as much time on. And, to kind of go back to Peter's point there about the whole getting started experience, it's still so hard for people, when they first come to the Ethereum paradigm, because not only have you got to get your head around a node, you've also got to get your head around a wallet, and you've got to get your head around Solidity. And it's all these things before you even start writing any code. So we're on a quest to kind of simplify that and also give people first-class developer experiences.
Brilliant. So you touched.
I was just going to say, and one other thing as well in the baseline too. That's the other area as well we're exploring, because right now the baseline's using by node infrastructure. For the smart contracts, we want to add in support using Web3j for that too.
Nice. Yeah, the enterprise folks that I've been talking to, baseline protocol is central to a lot of their considerations. So you mentioned ETH2 and as we look forward, and not just the implementation in Web3j, but Web3. Maybe Conor, Peter, sorry, you could kick us off in how does Web3 look like in an ETH2 era?
Yep. So good question. So I think ETH2, for those people who've been following it over the years, is a ever-changing beast. It has been morphing and changing, and new ideas come and go. There are definitely going to be shards of some sort. And the latest thought is that they'll be using a technique called roll-ups as a way of having massive scalability. But then you might have execution shards and data availability shards. I think the thing you can think about is, though, that you'd be targeting your Web3j at one of the shards, essentially, for your execution environments. And then it's a matter of dealing with how do you do cross-shard communications, because you can imagine you're going to have a contract on one shard and another contract on another shard, and you want to do a cross-contract call. So just working that through. So there are some complexities. But the thing that I think we can all be sure of is, one way or another, you're going to be able to write Solidity code and it's going to work on the Ethereum too. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And somehow or rather, the mainnet, as it is at the moment, is going to be a shard in ETH2. In fact, that's thought of as the transitionary process, is you get that working as part with the beacon chain. So I think that it's just a matter of being able to target multiple shards. I think that is going to be the big thing. But it's an evolving thing as exactly how the execution layer and data availability layer will work. Beacon chain is due to be launched really soon. So, yeah.
Conor, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I have to say that earlier on this year, when it kind of sounded a bit more certain that we weren't going to be launching brand new execution environments on ETH2 right from the get-go, it's a sigh of relief, because it meant that the fundamental infrastructure we've built up with Web3j around transaction signing, creating contract wrappers so you can natively interact with from the JVM with smart contracts. It just kind of still works as it always has. And it's something that's always a consideration with with any technology. That balance in terms of whether you decide to rewrite everything and start from scratch with a kind of more superior approach, or if you kind of stick with what you have because it's well understood and you kind of move across the other side. And I think so somewhat probably unintentionally, going back to the do the early, the early considerations with it. But Solidity has kind of become a global standard for smart contracts. It's like you look outside of the Ethereum ecosystem, like projects that can support Solidity say you can run, Solidity contracts on our blockchain because they know how many people, are familiar with that. And so, it's nice anyway to hear that, with ETH2 anyway, it's right now anyway, it should be going in that direction, which I think will make everyone's life a lot easier when it comes to the actual migration of it.
Excellent. Well, Conor, Peter, it's been a great deep dive into, this core part of, infrastructure for, building Web3. One thing I want to, call out to everybody, there's a survey that the Ethereum Foundation and the EA are doing on dev tools. So if you go to bit.ly.com/ETH Enterprise ETH Enterprise Dev is the chunk part of it. Love to get your feedback, and it's been great to support the Web3j project and make sure that everybody has the resources to build into the future, and by participating in the survey, you help us figure out where we'd spend our time and resources and supporting the community. So really appreciate you all taking the time, and it's been a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan, Peter, and Conor. And even though Dan kind of talked about the URL, we'll put that in the chat in a few seconds as well, so all of you watching can click on that link and fill out the survey. We are at time, but I do have a question for each of you, and we can just end on that question. And the question is kind of, as over the past few years, obviously you've interacted with a lot of enterprises trying to explore Web3 and integrating this into their day-to-day projects. What's kind of the most common thing that you hear that either hasn't still been addressed, or that we as a community have to still work on improving? And kind of what can people do to address those problems that you hear commonly?
Shall I go first?
Go for it.
That'd be great.
I think there's, unfortunately, there's still a lot of misconceptions that, if you run Ethereum, it's proof of work, which, it's annoying, right, when you hear that, because like there's so many other options there. But that's certainly one area that enterprises kind of do struggle with. But I mean, the other side though, and this kind of is by design really, with the public Ethereum network. It's really about individuals in terms of a wallet is kind of key identifier on it, and it's an anonymous identifier. With enterprises, when they want to transact with one another, they absolutely want to have complete certainty on who they're transacting with, and that sort of confidence there. So that's the key one. And it's not to say you can't kind of have abstractions to tie in with whatever, say, directory services, that map to like an Ethereum wallet, say, to work around that. But, with the platforms that were designed from the ground up for enterprise, it's like they kind of baked a sort of PKI type infrastructure into it. So it's like that just familiar paradigm, and they're using the crypto curves that are kind of the really well-known ones that, there's lots of implementations of that those enterprise security guys are most comfortable with.
Peter?
Yeah, look, I think one of the big things that we have is that a lot of people don't know that you can run a consortium chain in Ethereum. They just, you say Ethereum and they say mainnet, or they don't say mainnet. Ethereum is this, as Conor was saying, a proof of work, public chain, no permissioning, and yeah, a lot of enterprises instantly think chaos. The world's come to an end. Of course, there is Baseline, which is now a way for businesses to use mainnet and feel happy about their data. But I think consortium chains are a big thing too. And yeah, people often miss the fact that Ethereum can do that. That's me.
Nice. Yeah, for me, I often get asked the question, what's the killer app for Ethereum? Folks are poking at that, and the enterprise love to pick winners, and in that they're looking for why invalidating, why is Ethereum going to win, and ultimately, I think it's the distributed nature of the platform, and for folks to get to from where they are today in their adoption to really the maturity and the need and the use cases where distributed collaboration really clicks in. One of the things that I've been directing folks to focus on is something like baseline protocol. It simplifies the surface area of the problem set for an enterprise that is asking the question, what should I do now with Ethereum? That simple, I love to guide folks with the enterprise, lots of no's and one or two yeses. So, as Peter was saying, consortium blockchain, fantastic, and baseline protocol. So we can get that simple distributed point on the eventually mainnet.
That's wonderful. Dan, Peter, Connor, thanks again for this great panel.